If you think the 70s were only about the oil crisis, dying muscle cars, and the supposed laziness of American engineering, get ready to open a German steel vault and face a secret hiding in plain sight. This is not just a car. This is a declaration of war against financial common sense. It is the last cry of a time when engineers said to build the best and let someone else worry about the price. We are talking about the sedan that cost as much as 2 middle-class homes in California. The car that brought modern electronic ABS to public roads. The car with a V8 so extreme it needed a racing-style dry sump just to fit and survive under the hood. You will not believe what they put inside this machine. And the most unbelievable part is this. To check the oil, the owner had to follow a near-liturgical ritual with the engine hot and idling, and the dipstick mounted in a remote reservoir hidden behind the fender. This is the Mercedes-Benz 450 SEL 6.9, sold from 1975 to 1980. Today, we will dissect the most over-engineered car of the 70s. It is a masterpiece of design that also became a maintenance nightmare, and ultimately failed under the weight of its own brilliance. If you love the thin line between genius and madness in the automotive world, subscribe to Remember That Car and turn on notifications now. What Mercedes did next to redeem itself is even more interesting, and you will not want to miss it. The year is 1975. Gas lines stretch down city blocks. Inflation is squeezing families. In the United States, 7-liter V8s barely make 200 horsepower because of emission strangulation. In Stuttgart, Mercedes-Benz refuses to follow the trend. Instead, the company launches a luxury bombshell, the 6.9 version of the newly named S-Class built on the W116 platform. The W116 was not simply designed, it was armored. The philosophy came from Chief Engineer Hans Scherenberg. Safety and quality were non-negotiable, even if the cost made competitors shake their heads. Mercedes was not just building a car. It was setting a standard the rest of the industry would take years to reach. The W116 carried a rigid safety cell with carefully tuned crumple zones at the front and rear, a concept rooted in the pioneering work of Bela Baranyi. But the 6.9 pushed the obsession to another level. Fuel tank protection. The fuel tank moved to a protected space over the rear axle, away from the trunk, minimizing risk and severe rear impacts. Visibility and vacuum systems. Visibility systems included dedicated headlamp wipers and washers to make sure Autobahn speeds did not collide with muddy reality. Revolutionary ABS. In 1978, the W116 brought modern 4-channel electronic ABS to market in partnership with Bosch. It was an expensive option that changed the future of braking. It let a driver brake hard and steer on slippery surfaces with control most people had never experienced. From the outside, the 6.9 kept quiet. A discreet trunk badge, a subtle front spoiler, wider tires, no theatrics. The message was clear: power does not need to shout. Inside, the luxury was disciplined. Real wood, restrained forms, rich materials, and a column that hid an automatic transmission built like a safe. But the true wall of engineering lived where you could not see it. The heart was a piece of racing logic placed into a statesman sedan. The 6.9 inherited and expanded the legendary M100, the V8 used in the 600 Grosser limousine, a car favored by heads of state and movie stars. This was not a typical passenger car engine. It was a luxury ship motor adapted for the street. Displacement was 6.834 liters. Fuel delivery was through Bosch K-Jetronic mechanical injection. In Europe, output reached about 286 net horsepower, and 546 Newton-meters of torque. Although the American version was limited by emissions controls and compression, the car still pulled like a freight train. For a time, it was the fastest four-door sedan in the world, running 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in about 7 seconds and reaching around 225 kilometers per hour. Those numbers were shocking in a decade when performance became almost an apology. The shock, however, was not the power itself. It was the method used to sustain it. To lower engine height, ensure oil supply during long high-speed corners, and manage heat inside that vast block, Mercedes chose a dry sump lubrication system. In a dry sump, oil does not pool in a pan under the crankshaft. Scavenge pumps pull the oil away and send it to an external tank. From there, a pressure pump feeds the engine under all conditions. Deep advantages. The engine could be mounted lower, improving the center of gravity. Oil never sloshed away from the pickup in long Autobahn sweepers or hard braking. The system could also hold a large volume of oil for cooling and durability, about 12 liters. That is more than double the typical fill of a contemporary V8 from the brand. This arrangement, which solves racing problems inside a limousine, introduces one of the strangest ownership rituals in the classic car world. To check the oil, you bring the engine to full operating temperature. You leave it idling, you open a small access point near the fender, and measure level in the external tank with a special dipstick. If a mechanic unfamiliar with the system glances at the regular oil pan and assumes it is empty, he might dump in a huge extra volume and destroy the engine within minutes. The dry sump answers every engineering question with elegance and every maintenance question with a price. Mercedes was willing to place race shop logic into a luxury sedan because the goal was simple. Build the best big driving car on earth. The target was achieved. The bill arrived later. You will not believe what they used to keep this monster floating, and why that choice became the biggest source of owner nightmares. A steel spring suspension could not deliver the mix of Autobahn confidence and Rolls-Royce softness Mercedes wanted. The answer was a hydropneumatic system with automatic leveling. The concept had been proven by Citroën, but Mercedes re-engineered it to fit the 6.9 mission. Instead of steel springs, the car used hydraulic struts connected to gas-filled spheres. The spheres held nitrogen on one side of a flexible membrane and hydraulic fluid on the other. The engine drove a high-pressure pump. The system maintained ride height under any load and kept the car calm and level over rough roads and fast curves. Car and driver described the ride as silent and solid at any speed. You floated, but you were never sloppy. It felt like German discipline on a velvet cushion. The cost, however, hid in the details. Consumable spheres. The spheres are consumables. Over time, the membranes age and the nitrogen charge leaks. When that happens, the ride turns harsh and bouncy. Replacing the spheres, bleeding the system correctly, and using the exact hydraulic fluid specified by Mercedes were mandatory. Wrong fluid risk. Using the wrong fluid or allowing contamination could destroy the pump and valves. Repairing that failure cost the equivalent of a small engine in period dollars. Brake risk? Some owners discovered a second layer of risk. Because the pump also supported the high-pressure brake system in certain configurations, a failure in the hydraulic circuit could move beyond comfort and become a safety problem. A common line in owner communities is simple. If you cannot afford the suspension on a 6.9, you cannot afford a 6.9. The car demands the right fluid, the correct charge in the spheres, hoses that are not shedding rubber internally, and a proper sequence to purge air. Fear of that cost spread through the market, shifting the 6.9's reputation from untouchable luxury to an expensive gamble. They built a monster only they could tame. and the finance department was taking notes. On paper, the 6.9 was a triumph of applied engineering. In the showroom, it became a hard sell. Price of excellence. In the United States, a late 70s 6.9 listed in the high $30,000 range and climbed beyond $50,000 by the end of production. That was real mansion money in many suburbs. Total production was only a few thousand units, with fewer than 2,000 sent to North America. That kept the model rare and exclusive. But it also meant fewer mechanics had hands-on experience with its special systems. Hidden ownership cost. The press loved how it drove. Many declared it the best sedan in the world. Long-distance tests praised stability and effortless speed, then noted how an air conditioner might act up or a secondary system might need attention after a hard week. Nothing dramatic, but steady reminders that this was not a simple car. Open-ended maintenance risk was not tolerable for many buyers, even wealthy ones. Diagnosis. Vacuum circuits for climate control could be temperamental and time-consuming to diagnose. Maintenance. Oil changes required more oil and more attention. The suspension demanded specialist care. Snowball effect. If a car left the dealer network and fell into generic maintenance patterns, small errors could grow into catastrophic costs. At a corporate level, the 6.9 functioned as a technology showcase. It consumed engineering time and money that could not be justified by profit margin alone. Its value was symbolic. It kept the Mercedes halo bright. But the cost imposed a different lesson. Even a world-class engineering department cannot ignore total cost of ownership. The result was a legend and a warning. The 6.9 revealed how far Mercedes would go when engineers led without looking at the ledger. It also showed what happens when the bill arrives. What Mercedes did next matters even more. The response to this glorious excess rewrote the luxury car playbook. After the 6.9, Mercedes embraced a new principle. Perfection is not infinite complexity. Perfection is excellence made simple to own. The successor platform was the W126, the second-generation S-Class. It kept a high bar for safety, aerodynamics, and comfort, and it simplified where the 6.9 had complicated. Suspension. Steel springs returned as the default. Hydro-pneumatic systems became rare exceptions. Powertrains. A new family of lighter V8s replaced the dry-sump M100 in these sedans. Controls. Electronic fuel and spark management matured. Power, emissions, and economy could now coexist without mutilating engine character. The W126 became the quiet conqueror of the 80s and early 90s. It was elegant, durable, and far easier to service than the 6.9. In other words, Mercedes kept the crown by changing the rule. Build the exceptional, but make maintenance possible. Today, the 450 SEL 6.9 is a garage myth that still moves with authority. A well-kept example accelerates hard, brakes straight, and glides like a flying carpet. But buyers who skip the homework enter expensive territory. The safe path starts with fundamentals. Dry sump. The rule is simple. Check oil level only with the engine fully hot and idling. Measure at the remote tank accessed behind the fender. Use the correct oil and respect the large capacity. Treat it like any other car and you risk serious damage. Hydropneumatic suspension. Verify the charge in the spheres. Inspect the fluid. Dark fluid can indicate hoses decaying internally. The correct hydraulic fluid is mandatory. The aftermarket has evolved. Suppliers rebuild spheres with modern materials and add service ports for future recharging. Specialists know the raise and lower sequence by heart to purge air correctly. K. Jetronic injection. The mechanical injection system is robust when clean, but sensitive to dirt and incorrect pressures. Hot, idle quality, cold starts, and throttle response depend on proper control pressure and careful adjustments at temperature. The good news is that the M100 itself is almost indestructible when maintained. A cast iron block, aluminum heads, and forged internals give it a deep reserve of strength. The pain points tend to live outside the short block. Once those are addressed, the big lump of iron up front runs and runs. If you enjoy this level of forensic detail, subscribe to Remember That Car and stay to the end. The next part of the story is the brand correcting course in building the template the entire industry followed. Put the puzzle together. The 6.9 was the technical summit of the W116. It used a racing-style dry sump with about 12 liters of oil and a dipstick in a remote tank. It was a boutique product with only a few thousand built, and it marked a turning point. It taught Mercedes and the world a lesson that would guide luxury sedans for decades. Build the exceptional, but make maintenance practical. There is a human story behind the 6.9. In one corner stand the engineers who pushed physics. In the other stand the customers who bought what they believed was the best car in the world, then met invoices they never imagined. Over-engineered sounds like a compliment until a quiet Saturday turns into a long search for a specialty tool and the right bottle of fluid. Time has softened the edges. The 6.9 gives back in charisma what it takes in care. The idle has a heavy beat that rocks the body. The cabin swallows noise and returns calm. On a good day, the car feels like the future the 70s promised and almost never delivered. The Mercedes-Benz 450 SEL 6.9 did not fail for lack of talent. It failed from an excess of talent. It represents the last act of a philosophy that pushed cost and practicality to the margins. It was the perfect machine built for an imperfect world of expensive fuel and warranty ledgers. If you want a slice of this history, remember the ritual. To check the oil, warm the engine fully. Leave it idling. Open the access near the fender and use the dipstick in the remote tank. In this car, even the simple things remind you that extra engineering always collects a toll. Now it is your turn. What is the most over-engineered car you have owned, and what finally made you let it go? Tell us in the comments. If this autopsy of pride and brilliance spoke to you, subscribe to Remember That Car and turn on the bell. We have more episodes coming, including the secret General Motors program that nearly sank the company in the 80s. You will not believe the quick fixes they tried and what it took to hide the damage. Stay tuned.